Salem pretty easy to play, judging by the fact that you have 60% and you're extremely average. Yeah, I would not classify it as easy to play, because in order to play it correctly, you might not be remembering how much stuff you have to know to be able to play it correctly. Just the outcome. Well, yeehaw. Thank you, Luke. One of the first lines I played, well, I played CVs first, but I joined a clan when I was still super new, and they said, well, there's no CVs or there's no carriers in clan battles, but if you want to play, you need to get a cruiser line. Why don't you get a Des Moines? We always need Des Moines. Oh yeah, everybody wants Des Moines. So I played the Des Moines line, and I was terrible. I had no concept of overmatch. I had no concept of where I would go to use cover and how long I would expect to be there, or how I could deal with pushes, or how I could deal with all sorts of stuff. I mean, in a general sense, you can point your bow at the bad guy and just shoot him a lot and probably win if you're in a Salem or a Des Moines, but it's conditional. I mean, there could be carriers, there could be all sorts of stuff going on. So, yeah, it may not be rocket science, but it doesn't mean that it's not nothing. Tomorrow's not a... No, Battle Pass 7 days. 7 days away. Woo. I guess maybe I don't have the idea of how the amount of internalized knowledge I actually have. Well, here, do you want to do a test? Let's see. Let's do this. Let me see if I can find this real quick. There was a... I think I saved it on the desktop. Did I? Term ideation. Right. Here we go. So, throttle, rudder, how to control the ship, turning left, right, the various keyboard commands, how AP shells work, how HE shells work, torpedoes, because they're a threat against you, depth charges, no, this, no. Well, technically, I guess you could use this against other people, so this is something that's worth knowing. You should know about flak, you should know about priority sector, you should know about fighters, because they could be used against you for spotting, as well as how your AA interacts with it. Interceptors you should know about, at least to know that they won't spot you. Should know about carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines. You should know about capture points and how the points work, how important they are, how long you should have them, how you take them, how you hold them, when you take them, when you hold them, when you let them go. Standard battle, domination concept, which really comes back to capture point, sure. Arms race was a variant you might encounter. Airship escort, which is a variant we just encountered. Random battles, ranked battles, how you would, the arena that you're going to play the ship in. Upgrades for the ship, although basically that's fairly copy-paste. You can just kind of find somebody who says, get these, and then put them on there. Commander skills, same thing. Use these and then put them on there. But in terms of actually knowing what the upgrades do, knowing why you're using them, how you use them. For instance, the propulsion upgrade in slot 4 allows you to juke, but it only allows you to juke going forward. And if you juke going forward, you're going to move forward at a much faster rate than you would otherwise do. So if you pull forward, you need to be prepared to stop immediately if you are not trying to rocket out from the cover position that you're in, because slowing down takes much longer. So you have to be very cognizant of that. Commander skills, what specifically can you do, what specifically can't you do, depending on which skills you picked. Signals, does this alter the way that you play? Camouflages, that technically doesn't really matter anymore, but I mean, it looks pretty. Armory and premium shot, armory matters in terms of getting the Salem, but outside of that I would say no, although it is useful for signals. Events, I don't think that was going to really have anything related to it. Naval battles is not going to relate to your ability to play the thing. Clans, no. Operations, we don't have a tier 10 for this, no. Let's see, armor. You absolutely have to know about armor and concealment. Concealment's going to allow you to take position safely without, being spotted and potentially getting murder slammed. Also, you need to know about concealment in terms of the things that you want to shoot at. What can you see? What can't you see? Why can't you see it? Can you radar it? Because you're in a Salem or a Des Moines. Armor. How are you going to use your armor? Not just what you can pen, but how you pen it. Further, how can you use your armor to avoid being penned? How can you use your armor to potentially make you not dead, maybe? Citadel. Where is the citadel on your ship? How well is it protected? What guns overmatch it? What guns don't? How do you have to angle it? What does it look like? The engine. That's probably rough movement of the ship, I suppose you could say, but engine's probably not going to get knocked out very much. Secondaries, I would say, not very important for the Salem. Hydroacoustic search, probably not important for the Salem, but it is important for a Des Moines. Radar is important for Salem, so understanding radar, understanding how the consumable works, understanding when to use it. Funny story, some guy at college met another guy and saw he was playing World of Warships and was like, wow, you play World of Warships? That's awesome. And the guy said, yeah, I love the game. And he dropped into a battle, and the first thing he did was he hit his radar. And the guy was, the person who just met him was, why'd you use radar? Oh, I like the sound that it makes. It's so cool. Cool. So yeah, there's knowing what this is, knowing how to use it. Hydrophone, sure. Defensive fire, I would say important for the Salem. Also potentially important for the Des Moines, but I don't remember what slot that's in, so it might not be something you actually use. But still, very important for knowing if you are going to bunker down in a position, how can you extract the most planes or the most pain from the CV if they're trying to dislodge you from that position. Spotter plane, probably not something you have to worry about. Submarine surveillance, no. Repair party, yes. You do actually need to know how to use this, when to use it, why to use it, how to interact with it, how the charges work, etc. Damage control party, yes, you need to know that. Fires, you're going to be setting them. You'll also be set on fire. You need to know about this information. Flooding, same thing. You need to know all that. Smoke is not so important to you unless you are actually using smoke from a friendly ship. If you're using smoke from a friendly ship, it's going to alter your concealment. You're now going to be using a smoke fire penalty, which is something you can position off of. Are you too close to a thing? Do you need to be behind the smoke? If there are carriers can spot you out while you are outside of smoke, even if you are behind a smoke curtain, because they could see from a different angle. Therefore, you must be in the curtain or inside the smoke to make sure you are absolutely safe. Depending on how you're interacting with the CV, you may or may not want to leave your AA on, as that could give them at least a concept of where you are in the smoke, which they could torp, and that could be a problem for you depending. Also, smoke relates back to radar, as radar can penetrate smoke, which allows you to interact with potentially kill destroyers or maybe hidden cruisers or really whatever the hell you have to deal with. Saturation, also important, especially because you are in a high health cruiser or a cruiser. Des Moines, not a high health cruiser per se, but something that can take damage. Using saturation to your advantage, having a saturated bow and making sure to tank with it, having a saturated section of the ship. Sure, also you are a DPSer. You need to know how you're interacting with saturation on the enemy ships that you're shooting at to make sure that you're actually having good interactions, worthwhile interactions. Perhaps instead of shooting at the casemate, you could move to shoot the bow if you can pen the bow, because the bow is not saturated, so you'll do full damage to it as long as you can until you swap back to something else, which is more available for shots. Speaking of ship sections, you need to know what the different sections on the ship are, specifically in terms of saturation, as well as just general knowledge. Bow and stern can individually saturate. They're worth knowing. Mostly the bow's going to bounce, the stern maybe not. That can inform your decisions in terms of how you are positioning relative to other ships, as well as ships that you are going after. Superstructure is a consistently weakly armored area, something that you can go after with pretty much anything, except for very, very rare situations where that does not happen. Casemate, that goes down to a ship section. Deck, also super important. How thick is the deck on your ship? What shells does it shatter? What shells does it bounce? Depending on the thickness of the deck, that determines whether you can play at range, if you can play open water, what fights you can and cannot take. These are things you have to factor. Icebreaker, also important. This allows you specifically to open water or maneuver, because it can protect your citadel in nose-on engagements. It means that you can take positions that are not necessarily island-based if you just have a shoot me here button for anything that can overmatch you. Fire chance, I would say that's important. It relates to flags, although if you just equip the flags, then whatever, flag equals good. But still, knowing fire chance is important so that you at least have an expectation of the damage that you're dealing. Flood chance, not relevant to this. Reload, I would say that is relevant to this. Because Des Moines and Salem are fast reloading cruisers, which allows them to high DPM threat and out-threat other cruisers that are not high reload. If a Des Moines, for instance, is face-to-face with another cruiser that does not have the same DPM, the Des Moines may just bully it down. It might overwhelm it with destruction. Dispersion, worth knowing as far as aiming mechanics, what you can expect, how you can interact, what you can successfully shoot at. Granted, you're probably going to take shots at high value targets, but knowing dispersion means you'll be able to pick the target that's going to have the most effect for you in the general sense. Sigma, probably not very important for this per se, as that's really just going to come down to understanding the deeper part of dispersion. Shell flight time informs aiming and actually takes quite a lot of practice to figure out, not only for how you are shooting the target, but also the targets that are shooting you. If you are against something that is very, very floaty shells and it's a distance, then you know that you can take open water fights with it, specifically if your ballistics are better than their ballistics, because you are more likely to be able to avoid their shells than they will avoid yours. This can inform how you play the thing. Pings, this is probably useful for threat, depending on your situation. Pings inform how you are going to interact with homing torpedoes. So you might need damage con, you might need to see if you can swing to deal with the homing torpedoes. Basically, this comes down to submarines. Alternate firing modes, no. Special F key action, no. Spotting is important. That actually goes back to radar, as well as how you're going to interact with your targets by having other teammates spot for you so that you can then carry. It's not something that you're necessarily going to want to be doing. Specifically in a Salem or Des Moines, you wouldn't really be open water just spotting everything while not shooting, because if you do shoot in the open water spotting everything, that means everything can shoot you, and that is unlikely to end in your continuing to live. Rockets, important for knowing how to position your ship, or at least having a damage expectation of what's coming in. Aerial torpedoes, same. Aerial bombs, same. Skip bombs, same. Planes, more of a general term, I suppose. Lock-on targeting, again, falls back to aiming. Leading shots, again, falls back to aiming. Turret traverse was surprisingly slow on the Salem, but this is something you need to know. You could, for instance, try to drive by a battleship, which cannot actually turn its turrets fast enough to be able to track you, since you can just pump damage into it as long as you can brace against the first salvo. Turret characteristics, again, something that people that are really mechanically inclined will memorize so that they know what they're going against, and then break it down to each commander skill, stuff. All of that stuff to play the Salem. And then, not only do you know that, you also know a variety of other things about the UI and other things as well. So, I don't know how long it took me to read that, and I read it as an abbreviated form of just like word vomit, but it is a non-insignificant amount of stuff that you have to know to be able to play it to a basic expectation of good. To not know about armor, to not know about overmatch, to not know about positions or fights you can take or fights you can't take. It's very easy to just show up in this and be like, hi, I'm in a Salem. I hear it's really good, and then get exploded. Thank you very much for the sub, Luke. Been a long-time follower. Yes, you have. Thank you very much for the 16 months. And being a VIP at that. So I don't know if that was useful for anybody to just like hear that giant list of stuff, but don't take for granted how much you know when just playing this game, because there is so much that you have to absorb when doing this. All right, so the Salem should actually be good now. Salem should be finished. I'll go ahead and refresh this. You agree, you have 6,000 battles, learned a lot of that through Hard Knocks. Is useful for you. Well, that's good. If you play chess, there are some high-end chess players that they'll memorize positions. So they can look at the board, and the board is in X configuration, and they go, oh, I know what this is. And then they know the next step, because they recognize the pattern. But for a person who doesn't know chess, you just see a bunch of pieces on the board. Well, I know the horse can make an L. And like, you can see possibilities, but you don't see how the pattern unravels itself or sews itself together or whatever. You don't have that information. But when you have all of this stuff committed, burned into the depth of your soul, then yeah, a lot of this stuff just, you pump it out. Okay, so Salem is now looking good. That's pretty cool. I'm glad we were able to keep the damage metric there. Surprised it was only this. I thought we did a little more than that, but maybe not. 116, 137. So it would have gone up a little, but it wasn't spectacular. Okay. Next.